Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scotty Hagness. This is Conversations, Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity. Scotty, how goes it?
It's going good.
Good, man.
I'm geared
The
up, resting for my weekend of mountain biking here. So
That's right. So
gonna
this
go
is
down this time.
this is it. This is this weekend, right?
Yeah, tomorrow's ride
Okay.
one. So yeah,
Very cool, my man. And you have somebody come along with you this time, or are you going solo?
I have a friend that's done it all the years except last year's.
Yep, I remember
Back in
that.
action. Yeah, I hurt his back a few weeks ago
But
on
he's
some
he's he's
unknown way, and he's fine now though. So.
okay. Very good. I just want to kind of briefly pick up where we left off last week. So last week we were talking about how the breakdown of the workouts on a coaching basis and how to train specific aspects of the tests that the Masters CrossFit Games, went into. The first workout being a run, swim, run. The second workout being a max snatch. The next day, it started out with the assault bike overhead lunge. Then we went into the last test of the day was second one was the obstacle course. The second one on Friday was the obstacle course. The last one was 50 chest to bar pull-ups, 40 toes to bar, and then 30 clean and jerks with 165. We got into, and we went on a bit of a tangent in terms of how to actually train that type of test, where it's a longer aerobic power workout that finishes with a barbell cycling, moderate to high CNS type movement. And we talked about how some methodologies of how to actually train that. But I came across a couple of posts recently, and I want to ask you about it and see what your thoughts are. So the guys at Training Think Tank are starting to use the Moxie, or have been using the Moxie tester for a while now. And they did it on more novice type athletes, various type athletes, game or regional type athletes, all this kind of stuff. And one of the things that they're finding, and they're going to be presenting at the Moxie Summit, is how the limiter doesn't seem to be localized mitochondrial or like blood getting to the muscles. What seems to be the limiter is actually more upstream in the ability for the heart and lungs to exchange enough oxygen and CO2 at a rate that allows you to sustain the output aerobically. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so just me throwing that at you, what are some of the things that come up off the top of your mind?
We don't have the internal engine perhaps developed enough or appropriately to sustain the type of efforts that we're asking ourselves to do. It would appear, and this is sort of my experience, like I touched on last week, that several years back when the Moxie first came out, we were playing with it here as well. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to purchase one here myself, but I had someone else's that was testing. And it was the same thing. It was not a limiter. We can apparently develop the ability to use it locally fairly well. However, most people haven't built that engine or don't have that in order to use it. So pulmonary, cardiorespiratory, the delivery system. And to some degree, as I think back to, just through all the years of being here, people that came in and seemed to have a great engine, nearly always had an extensive endurance sport background or field sport background training in some way before they came in, or various other long, lower effort pursuits. And then they were able to adapt and harness that as they developed the localized stuff. People without that seem to be blunted in their development unless they go out and do it. But since that was never something that was really pushed as being important too much until more recently, you saw people sealing because they simply couldn't use what they were capable of doing, getting oxygen to the muscles essentially.
So yeah,
inside out.
So my thought is that, reading these types of findings is that it's not necessarily a localized mitochondrial density deal. So Joe Jameson's high intensity continuous training, almost trying to create more of an aerobic type muscle, probably has some merit. But just like thinking about that off the top of my head, because the purpose of it is to increase mitochondrial density in fast twitch muscle fibers. So there might be some help there, but I think more importantly is how efficiently can people exchange oxygen and more importantly, get rid of CO2. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think that becomes the reason, the thing that drives breathing and want of breathing is not necessarily a lack of oxygen, but a buildup of CO2, correct?
Correct.
Am I
Yeah.
getting my physiology right there?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if that's the case, if we're not getting rid of CO2 quick enough, or we're not driving it out quick enough by actually getting some oxygen into the localized cells, right? So localized like muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So, two things, not to get too much tangential here, but one of the byproducts of effort locally is blood pooling. So that is an increase in blood pressure. So that pump. So your legs get pumped, let's say you're doing a cycling test. You then have to overcome the blood that's already there to then force new blood into it. So you would actually need to be able to forcefully drive blood into those areas. So I think that's probably more of a cardiac system, whereas the actual exchange of oxygen via the blood is more of a pulmonary deal, so your lungs. Now, in terms of the cardiac, definitely thinking about, cardiac output, the things that you hit on, like the people with the huge endurance background, the ability to actually get the blood moving more effectively, right? The strengthening
Mm-hmm.
the heart, the stroke volume, and the actual stroke rate. The other thing is, are people properly training their respiratory systems and keeping up with the number of respirations and the amount of volume of oxygen and CO2 needed to actually maintain the exercise? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
we have the car, and the passenger is the oxygen, and we want to get the car to the muscle so it can drop off the passengers. There's a couple ways that are, there's many ways to make this whole system more efficient, but there's the cardiac and then there's the pulmonary. The cardiac being, let's get the ability for it to get there faster. And then there's, can we actually improve the ability for the oxygen and the CO2 to get in and out more effectively as well? Which we kind of hit on last week about like how to actually train some of the diaphragm muscles and the breathing muscles through breath holding and that kind of stuff. But have you tried out positional exercises like sitting in a deep squat or hands overhead? Have you tried any of those methods in terms of trying to do the same thing in terms of learning
Practice
how to
breathing there.
breathing in those
Yeah.
positions?
Yeah. I haven't explored like every uh, version of them, but the expansive breathing done in a squat is a great position. Lunge is one I've typically
Ah,
used it. Absolutely any form of overhead, press, jerk grip, snatch grip, all that would have merit. Another really difficult place for many folks to do it is go try this hanging from a pull-up bar in a hollow position and see how that goes for you.
yep.
Um, yeah. So there's lots of positional things, and people may find they can do it in some positions significantly better than others, but it has value in all positions.
Yeah, my mentee and I did a positional breathing exercise workshop last Friday, and that was actually something that we hit on. Was like, all right, let's see what a front plank position looks like. Such an elementary position for most people. Now, can you actually sustain this for a prolonged amount of time by allowing oxygen to actually get to the muscles and be able to hold the contraction? So what goes first? Does your muscles go first, or does your ability to breathe within that position go first? And most likely it's your ability to actually breathe in that position. Which again, when you take that position and you make it upright and you say, okay, time to put a jump rope in your hands, and they say, why do I gas out so easily on a double under? Well, are you in an extended position during your double under? Are you able to maintain your posture without having to use bigger muscle groups that go quicker? And can you actually develop your breathing muscles enough that you can actually breathe while doing double unders?
Mm-hmm.
That one is just like a simple little test of like basically hold your breath, do 50 double unders, and then see if you can do that again. Like most people cannot because they can't figure out how to breathe in that position. I think we've also hit upon the fact that it becomes a very sympathetic drive, and the fact that when you're trying to count and breathe at the same time and not trip over your rope, that also becomes more of a challenge as well.
Yeah, totally. There's a lot of reasons why double unders activate the sympathetic nervous system, and therefore down goes your skill and you trip. But also, I mean, how many people barely breathe in double unders? Right? They're so focused on everything else, or they're so no breathing. I mean, well, yeah, of course you're going to gas out. You're not breathing.
Yeah. So like I used that, and then I started looking at a lot of other movements, and like, you know, anecdotally, I had one of my athletes doing row repeats, and I had them like, I let him do the first one, let him do the second one, and then I said, okay, what I want you to do is focus on getting big exhales during this last set. Because I observed in the first couple sets, the first one, they were able to kind of cruise through, 1,000-meter repeats. Second one, when they got to the 500-meter mark, you can see them start to exert more to sustain the effort. So that instantly tells me that they're having to do more work to do the same output, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can get more into that in a second, but I was like, let's just keep it the same. One variable. I want you to go ahead and just focus on your breathing, big exhales as you're getting into it, and I kind of coached her through it a little bit. And sure enough, was able to hold about like a 4 or 5 second faster pace for that 1,000 meters. And they said my arms didn't burn out nearly as much that time. I said, great. They're like, my quads were, but I didn't burn out. And this person also is notorious for having lower back pump and burnout during row repeats. So I got to thinking afterward, I was like, all right, so let's kind of examine what happened for a second here. You have an athlete who doesn't breathe while doing rowing. So they can at a relaxed pace with their breathing, they can get through, but after about 4 minutes of work, all of a sudden they start to accumulate so much CO2 and so much fatigue within the muscles that they have to either decrease the effort and not make it sustainable, or make it more sustainable effort, or they have to work harder to do the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean that makes absolute sense. And what was one of the things that I did my Moxie testing originally? The first thing we did was with rowing, and that was where the limiter really showed up. As I was not expiring enough carbon dioxide to allow the gas transfer to take place, and so that was a forceful exhalation protocol. And it was interesting how much more aerobic efforts would feel. Basically, what you said she described, like the burn kind of goes away, and then you don't have that a little bit of lactic haze that I know we all know when we dip into the glycolytic system a little bit, you feel it. And like if it was there at all, it was gone almost immediately.
Yep.
And so a little tangent on that, I also did it in mixed modal work, stuff with box jumps, wall balls, toes to bar, some barbell cycling. So a variety of things. We kind of saw what happened. And wall balls was one place in particular, and this is the quad that we were testing. And I had typically done wall balls with one exhalation, kind of throwing the ball probably, as you launch. And it switched in my head, trying to get more expiration. I started doing double breaths. So not holding my breath, trying to be efficient. So using the breath when I need a little bit more tighter core, which will be the effort phase of, the finish of the throw.
Yep.
And also the reception as you receive and go into the hole. So I'm allowing the effort of the movement to expire the air for me. And I'm no longer actually attempting to breathe in and breathe out. I'm allowing the movement to do the work for me.
Yeah.
And it would naturally lead to a double exhalation. And the effect on that was pretty incredible, how much bigger sets and feeling more aerobic that made the movement, and that it changed the Moxie reading. And then I shared it with people in the gym, just people in class. This one guy an older gentleman, but a pretty fit dude for 60 something, and he was just floored how much easier it made wall balls for
Oh,
him.
wow.
And he was smoking so many younger guys. It was kind of the thing I just was talking to him one day and shared with him, and he came back and he said, he
Wow.
was so stoked. I told him that I can beat all these guys now on wall balls because they're easy.
Yeah, yeah.
But it
yeah.
was just a matter of exchanging the gas in a different manner, taking that extra breath, and boom,
Yeah.
big change.
And it's interesting because one, the back pump and burnout most likely comes from the fact that her legs and arms are already burnt, so she's got to recruit other muscle groups. So you're like, why would you, like well, one thing is if you have poor breathing mechanics, you could possibly be recruiting your lower back and lats too much to actually breathe. But
they're probably doing some breathing work,
breathing work. But then the other thing is that they're doing extra work because the arms and the legs are already burnt out. So it's like, I got to be able to stay in this pace. I got to figure out a way to do that. So that's kind of like what happens there. The other thing that I noticed is, and it's, I kind of think back, and so like retrospectively, is that a lot of people, as soon as they start to fatigue, will start to drop their stroke rate. And I think, like, why would you drop your stroke rate? You're going to pull harder, but what it does is it allows you to breathe because there's those pauses within the stroke. So you're unable to do a stroke rate of 28 to 32 because it doesn't give you a spot if you don't know how to breathe. Whereas if you pull, you're actually like pausing the movement, sitting there, breathing, and then continuing the movement. Whereas that is not technically, that's a high intensity continuous training. You want to breathe through the entire movement. So it's something that I've actually been trying to integrate and more in a lot of the higher repetition movements, bodybuilding type movements that I've been doing, just to kind of practice it and also see what it does relative to the number of reps and the exertion that I'm doing. Am I limited by my like CNS, or am I limited by the fact that I'm not exchanging oxygen and CO2 enough and my muscles burn out?
Yeah, super interesting. Wish we all had units to play around with.
I know. But
they're not actually that expensive. That's in the in the grand scheme of things. But
I mean, do you need one forever? No. Could you play with one over a weekend and work on some protocols and then go out, test it, and then come back? I think that would probably be the best.
I think you could learn a lot. Yeah, you could learn a lot with test protocols and see what's really going on under the hood.
I think we're going to see some enormous improvements in mixed modal work once we start really getting under the hood and seeing what are the limiters, because I think breathing is something that's overlooked. I think we've done so much work in the cardiac development for athletes. I think we don't really appreciate nearly as much about how much of a gas exchange is a limiter, because there's been really never a sport where that it has taxed your ability for your postural muscles to breathe in this way. Like, what competition can you think of where you're going from position to position in many different ways, like aerobically, specifically, right? Because by definition, the sports aerobically are pretty much monostructural. Like cycling, you're sitting there. So you develop the ability to breathe in that position. Cycling, rowing, cross-country skiing, swimming. You're learning how to breathe. Not to mention, all those sports have such a huge like thought behind the breathing. Like, one of the first things you do when you learn how to swim is learn how to breathe.
Pretty essential. Yeah.
And a lot of the time, your ability to actually have a higher stroke rate is limited by your ability to actually exchange oxygen and that kind of stuff too. So it's similar to the whole rowing thing. Now, when you throw the complexity of the movements, like imagine cycling barbell work and having to keep that aerobic. Like, how complex is that?
Yeah.
So I think this might be one of those things where you practice it or do a large volume of your work monostructurally to understand how to breathe. Obviously, starting at a lower intensity and building intensity over time. And then actually doing like almost non-fatigue based mixed modal work, learning how to breathe in the positions, maybe even some just static breathing exercises, kind of like you were talking about. But I think it all comes together when you then, after a lot of time practicing this in a non-fatigue, non-testing state, go ahead and try it in a testing state and see what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess a good prep strategy. You breathing, look at the positions in the workout, or if it's a test, you're gonna develop good breathing mechanics in each of those under lighter loaded as part of your warm up, just like you would build up to whatever weight you're using, or
Yeah.
practice the movement ahead of time. That's every bit as essential portion of properly being prepared to have your absolute best output.
It's funny, like how when you look at a workout, you're like, I'm going to squat, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do exercises that open up those positions. But are you actually increasing your breathing and respiratory rate within those positions too? So I think that's something also to be like thought about. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
you do like ankle mobility to improve your squat, but are you doing respiratory work to warm up your squat? Can
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
breathe? Can you do that in the squat? Like you said, like you can crush your wall balls just by changing your respiratory rate and the ability to breathe. So I think it's a really cool thing. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
something I'm going to tinker around with over the next few weeks and stuff. I already have been, and it's again, it also goes back to your ability to actually breathe in general. So it goes back to kind of postural stuff, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
continuing to play around with that and staying more relaxed and seeing what the limiters and what I have to inhibit and activate to kind of get into better breathing positions. But I know one thing is that's a driver is the nervous system. Like when when you're in this sympathetic state, it's just harder to breathe. As soon as I get done with workouts, like and I try these breathing exercises and try to take deep breaths, it's like the restriction is gone and I'm able to kind of breathe again. So it's something to kind of think about, and maybe being in a relaxed state prior to workouts again kind of lends to maybe better performance. But we'll have to see, and we'll have to kind of test that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Cool stuff.
yeah, man.
Move on into the weekend.
Yeah. So Saturday rolls along, and the first workout on Saturday, I believe, was so the first workout. So that was it was a double under power snatch workout, not too dissimilar from 11.1, 11.2. I think they did it three times. The 10-minute.
Oh, 14-1 and 11-1, 14-1. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pain.
the 15, 30 double unders, 15 power snatches. So this was 15 snatches, 50 double unders, 3 rounds. 4 rounds, excuse me, 4 rounds, 4 rounds. This was brutal. Like I looked at that word on paper, I'm like, oh, that's gonna hurt. But the load was light enough for Myra where that wasn't going to be as taxing aerobically for her, so she can kind of just get away with maybe holding her breath and just going. And we had been working on a lot of double underwork since she was exposed in a workout that we tested 2 months prior. We did the triples from 2013-14, the 300 double unders, 3,000-meter row, 3K or 3 mile run.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we did that, and she was abysmal on the double unders. So that was something we worked on for 2 months, really working good long sets of double unders, making them efficient. And she went unbroken throughout the entire workout. We had tested it prior in the week before this workout. She went unbroken, so she was confident that she'd be able to do it. So with the
Nice.
transitions, she was still able to do it unbroken, no real rests or anything like that. Her transitions were her rest. She did phenomenally. The thing that became a limiter is just the ability to cycle the barbell relative to the other athletes. She did the entire workout unbroken. I think she finished 8th.
Wow.
So smaller athletes,
Yeah. Yeah.
barbell
Starts to
cycling.
add up. Yeah.
Yeah, but also the ability to actually sustain a contraction speed without spilling over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I put in the back of my head because I'm like, okay, that's something we're definitely going to need to work on. And I hopefully it doesn't come up again this weekend where it's just contraction speed is the limiter in terms of her performance. So,
Yeah.
she finished 8th. I think she finished like 5 seconds behind like 3rd. So it's like, all right, you did it unbroken. You did exactly what you wanted to do. Let's move on. Second workout of the day was not so good. This was the 4 rounds for time, 12. It was a 400-meter run with a vest, 24 air squats, 12 burpee box jump overs to a 30-inch box. You're allowed to use your hands. This is where we got exposed. Yep. Burpee box jumps. Burpees in particular for Myra, but I was shocked at how many athletes were flying through this workout. Like the run
Ah.
right into the squats, right. And these girls, even Myra, who is not slow by any means on these burpee box jump overs, they were crushing them, and then getting done with the burpee box jump overs, and then going right back to a solid pace on the run. But that became again, going back to being the coach is like, okay, like this is something that is evident in that you're basically holding your breath, or you're not able to sustain burpee box jump overs aerobically because you're getting done with that and then you can't run.
You're gassed.
And you're
Yeah.
gassed. And the first half of the run is catching your breath. So, I think she finished like 16th or something like that in that out of like 19 athletes who were remaining. So she did not fare well there. I was like, I did not expect that. But I mean, I that's pretty much as good as she was going to do. She was flying on her burpees and that kind of stuff, maybe pacing it a little bit better on the front half. But I know the type of athlete, the longer the workout goes, she's just going to be suffering longer and longer.
How long did that one take roughly? You remember?
I think it was like an 18-minute cap, I want to say, maybe even a little bit more. I mean, I could find that out, but
I can check it out. Yeah, no, I was just curious off the top of your head what that would have been.
Not 100% sure, but it was also with the 14-pound weight vest. I think it was
right. Yeah,
maybe 14 something. No, 14:46. I think her time was, or something like that.
Yeah, I was going to guess that was going to be roughly what I would. Think for that level of athlete, maybe,
Yeah. And again, like, that was basically as good as she was going to do. But that right there in a microcosm is why she doesn't make regionals. Like, Becca Voigt came up to Myra. She goes, so you've been to the games before or the regionals? She goes, nope. I was on a team once to regionals. And she was like, are you serious? Because this was at the point Myra was in first place throughout the weekend. And she was like, wow. After that event, I think one of the other athletes came up to her. She's like, oh, so you don't have an engine. And she was like, yeah, I'm not good at burpees. And, and a few of the other athletes really weren't good at burpees either. And you can see why, like, they're very well-rounded athletes, but they just can't sustain output through burpees. So, Scott, that's something we're working on right away. That's one of the first things we started working on this off season, and I tried to do it in a longer aerobic piece. So I did double unders, burpee box jump overs in the 20-inch box, and then 200-meter run. So really making movements challenging, because double unders are challenging to keep sustainable, sets of 50. Yeah. Running 200 meters, which is no short distance, and then 10 burpee box jump overs. I did it with her, and I set the pace. And I have been, developing high aerobic work over the last, 2 to 3 months. And my pace lasted for 12 minutes. Her pace lasted for about 5, and then she was hurting. And, I asked her afterward, I'm like, so at what point did you really start to hurt? And she goes, I looked at the clock at about 4.5 minutes, and I go, this is going to be a long 12 minutes. And I go, that's probably, yep, that's exactly what I anticipated. So then we had a 6-minute rest and then did it again. And I think I improved by like 10 double unders, and her performance dropped off significantly, like probably about a minute less of work or something like that. And I'm like, this isn't the right prescription. I was like, she's just going to learn how to suffer more.
Pushing a reliance on that anaerobic side, or at least slow glycolysis.
So
how to make it aerobic. All right. Is there breathing mechanics poor on the burpee box jump overs?
So that's something that we looked at. Again, all right, so picking your brain about this. So what are some of the things that you would look at based upon that result?
Well, knowing the engine, I'm thinking overall probably breathing in some capacity, but I would really look to those movements specifically and see what, really trying to watch, observe, and see what could be going on there and what could be done to make those more efficient.
Yep.
And, it could be just literally skill work. I mean, they seem like they're such simple exercises, but if you can't get full excursion of air in a relaxed manner.
Yeah. Relaxed manner too.
That's the key. I mean, there's people routinely use so much extra tension to accomplish things like burpees.
Yeah.
And they rarely show up for speed or power. So that's not the correct way to get them done. And just that alone, can certainly help, but it's a different mindset.
Exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's not that people do them fast. It's just they keep at the same speed and they never slow down, and it becomes aerobic. It becomes sustainable, and they get up and they do the next thing. But yeah, so this week the prescription I gave her, because again I wanted to kind of hear what your thoughts were prior to me giving what I changed it up. So she was supposed to build volume in the same way, but I was like, there's no way she's gonna be able to build volume this way. So what I did was I did an EMOM, 30 seconds burpee box jump overs, and then on the opposite minute I had her do a 100-meter run, and the emphasis was focusing on breathing mechanics throughout. So really reducing it down, but putting volume in. You know what I mean? 20 minutes, so that's 10 sets of burpee box
Large
jump
amount,
overs.
yeah.
And I think we're going to run with that for a little bit. And I was constantly getting input from her. I'm like, all right, so how do those feel? How'd you feel at the end of the burpee box jump over? She goes, I'm like, could you have go ahead and run right away? She goes, yeah, for the most part. Like, as I got to the end, they got more challenging. I go, okay. So at like minute like 18, 19, 20, that's when her ability to sustain this power output kind of went away. All right, great. Let's go to next week. Maybe we do 20. If you feel good, let's go to 24 minutes or something like that. So base it upon what her exertion is, and then that's it. You're done. So she's not going to be doing any 20-minute AMRAPs with burpee box jump overs, that kind of stuff. That being said, we're also not going to get away from longer stuff anyway. It just needs to be done in a way where she can sustain the power output.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way. It builds in a kind of regulator of the intensity, and you can build with quality.
Yeah. Like I
Yeah.
could put her on an assault bike and say, okay, you're doing 20-minute intervals, and she'll have no problem doing it because she's just sitting there kind of in a conversational pace. But, I think the magic of what CrossFit is, and to get better at CrossFit, is how do you make 10 minutes at a very high effort sustainable?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been tinkering around with things that we've done before. Right now, personally, I'm doing 3 hard aerobic sessions a week, high power, but sustainable stuff. So like I'm doing the 10-minute, 10-minute, 10-minute with full 10-minute rests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the row,
Nice
bike,
kind of threshold
run.
work. Yeah.
And then I'm doing like 30-second work, 30-second rest, 30-second work, 30-second rest, but on 2 different modalities, but making them aerobic. The thing that I'm focusing on there, so I'm doing like push-ups for 30 seconds at tempo, but I'm breathing throughout. And then I'll do an assault bike for 30 seconds, but I'm breathing throughout, staying relaxed and keeping it aerobic. So would it be would it be a 1-minute max pace? No. But that's not the point.
No. All right.
I want to try to hold like a 2-minute pace at a sustainable ability, like aerobically. So you're thinking about, okay, I'll do this for 2 minutes, but I'm going to make it as easy as possible. Can I make the hard work easier?
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to, make it easy as possible. Yep.
Yeah, and I'm seeing pretty good results. It's not, I don't think I'm dipping too much glycolytically just because I'm not getting the huge fatigue and not able to sleep and that kind of stuff. So very high aerobic work, and I have a completely new appreciation for the amount of aerobic work, high power aerobic work that one needs to do, and the feeling of it, and what those limiters might be in terms of breathing and all different types of other things that we need to work on. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think, and working, like you said, it's going to take a fairly high volume of that. And
building the volume and keeping the intensity relatively the same.
Yeah. Then a method I've used, it's pretty similar, but it's the idea, where you have AMRAPs. But the key here is you have to know the athlete really well to give the prescription, and the pieces of the mixed modal probably have to be smaller than you think they are, especially, if the person has trouble breathing. And so it might be, your monostructural piece, maybe is a 200-meter run, but then maybe it's only 5 burpee box jump overs and something, and then over time that grows into larger bites as they're able to stay a little more aerobic, can get more reps per, but for initial starting out, I start people on probably a lot lower.
And what kind of interval sizes would you do there? Like what kind of lengths?
Ooh, it depends. I generally, because I'm trying to think of a little longer than I would have started. I used to start with like 3s or 5s, so I'll typically start, more like 10s and go through 15s and 20s, even a couple 20s. Change the movements up, in between those 2 work periods, but certainly similar still.
Yep. Yeah, so you're saying like rather than doing a large amount of work, you break it into pieces a little bit. So it's like instead of 15 burpee box jump overs, you do 5. Instead of 50 double unders, you're doing 20.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't build to the point where now you're spilled over. You do this, and then you're
Yeah,
going to a new movement where that ability to sustain is now in a different spot.
exactly. Yeah, the run off, or if it's a run, or it could be any modality, but maybe even 100 meters or
Yeah.
something pretty short,
Yep.
where they're moving through the things, but it gets into like a real sustainable type pace.
Yeah. Almost like that test that we had done before, the 10 kettlebell swings, 10 burpees with 100-meter runs in there.
Yeah,
I mean, that right there.
boxing. That's a great version of that. That one is an aerobic test.
Yeah. It's an aerobic test, and there's not very much of a limiter, but that's one of those things you've got to be able to pass that test if you want to earn your ability to do higher power aerobic work.
Yeah, that's still of all the workouts I've ever come up with, that's my favorite.
I prescribe
one,
that
hands down.
I prescribe that to a bunch of people too, and it'll tell you right away if this person knows how to breathe and knows how to do aerobic work. Because most people will get 2 rounds in and be like, "Oh my god, what is this?" And then there's some people are like, "Dude, I could have done that for 2 hours." I'm like, "That's what you want."
Yeah. It's definitely the kind of thing. If you have a good engine, it's not bad. You can go at a good pace, keep going. Could keep going longer.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, we're running up on the time here, Scott. You got anything else for today?
I think that'll do it for today.
Perfect. We're chipping away.
A lot of traction here, but that's cool.
That's it, man.
And some good stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean@CrossFitDelrabeach.com.
And I'm Scott Hagnes. You can get me at Scott@CrossFitPortland.com.
Perfect, Scotty. We'll talk to you next week. All right.
Yeah, sounds good.
Later, dude.
Later.